Imagine stepping into a live Iwo Jima minefield. You are carrying a 24-pound bomb and absolutely zero rifles. Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack one of the most unbelievable, heart-pounding tactical feats of the entire Pacific War.
I mean, just look at the terrifying math here. 24 pounds of heavy explosives, 0 firearms to actually defend yourself, and 1 live minefield that is explicitly designed to kill you. You know, this wasn't some Hollywood movie script. This was the grim, absolute reality facing Sergeant Ross F. Gray on February 21, 1945. That's just 2 days into the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history. When you really stop and consider those numbers, the suspense is it's palpable. How in the world could anyone possibly survive a setup like this, let alone actually succeed?
Okay, let's dive into this. How do you actually clear an unbreakable defense while completely unarmed? Right? To understand the sheer magnitude of what Gray pulled off, we first have to understand the absolute nightmare the Marines were walking into. The Japanese hadn't just, dug some trenches. They had completely redefined what island defense even meant.
Section 4. The Iwo Jima Defenses. Kuribayashi's Underground Fortress.
So, the mastermind behind all of this was Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi. He basically took this island of volcanic rock and transformed it into an unprecedented engineering marvel. It was essentially designed to draw the Marines into a giant meat grinder. Starting way back in March 1944, the Japanese garrison labored tirelessly, and they carved 18 kilometers, yes, 18 kilometers of tunnels directly through solid volcanic rock. That's enough to span a small city. It was an entire subterranean network connecting hundreds of bunkers, pillboxes, and artillery positions.
Now, the crucial part to understand is right here in these technical challenges. These weren't just random, isolated holes in the dirt. No, these were interconnected bunkers with mutually supporting firing arcs. What does that actually mean? Well, if you somehow managed to hit one bunker, another one immediately had it covered. Plus, the terrain was heavily camouflaged and full of deliberate bottlenecks, forcing the Marines into these incredibly narrow, lethal corridors. And the whole system, it was engineered to just absorb heavy naval and aerial bombardment and keep right on functioning. The brutal logic was simple. Don't try to stop them on the beach, just bleed them continuously as they push inland.
Section 7. Mine and Booby Trap Training. Preparing the Deacon.
So, facing a defense like that, you need a very, very specific type of mind. Enter Sergeant Ross F. Gray. He was a deeply religious former carpenter from Marvel Valley, Alabama. His men actually called him the Deacon. And as it turns out, he possessed the exact expertise needed to crack Kuribayashi's fortress. He had totally mastered the 4th Marine Division Mine and Booby Trap School. His intense curriculum covered everything: constructing complex minefields, completely disarming explosive devices in total pitch blackness, and cutting clean, safe lanes while under active combat fire.
And here's the kicker. He wasn't just some student passing through. Gray mastered this stuff so thoroughly that his instructors officially rated him fully capable of teaching every single one of those elite skills to other Marines. He was quite literally a master of explosives and traps. But, because there weren't any open instructor billets at the time, the Deacon stayed exactly where he belonged, right with his rifle company heading straight into the Pacific War's deadliest island.
Section 10. Unarmed in a Minefield. February 21, 1945.
Now let's bring it back to that high-stakes present. The 4th Marine Division hits the right flank on February 19th. Tragically, Gray's lieutenant and several platoon members are killed almost instantly, so Gray has to step up as acting platoon sergeant. Fast forward 2 days into the fight, and his platoon is stopped dead in their tracks by a brutally concentrated Japanese grenade barrage. Gray pulls his men back and does something that is just unbelievably brave. He goes forward completely alone, on foot, under heavy fire, just to get a read on what they are up against. And what he finds is a total nightmare. He realizes that clearing just one bunker accomplishes absolutely nothing. There's this massive minefield blocking their entire advance, and it's sitting right in front of a whole row of reinforced, mutually supporting emplacements that are all connected by covered trenches. So the reality hits him. The whole complex has to fall at once, or not at all.
After reporting this grim reality back to his company commander, Gray volunteers to neutralize the whole thing himself. So he and 3 volunteers run back to the ammunition point, and they haul up 12 heavy satchel charges, staging them right near the platoon line. Then he turns back to his men. He looks right at them and just utters 3 very quiet words: pray for me. And with that, he actually drops his rifle, picks up that very first 24-pound explosive charge, and literally steps right into the kill zone.
Section 13, 12 Deadly Minefield Crossings. The assault begins.
The pacing of this next moment is just agonizing. Picture this guy walking straight into an active minefield, and he's protected by covering fire from only 3 Marines behind him. Literally every single step he takes could trigger an explosion. But he carefully navigates those mines, reaches the very first emplacement, and shoves the heavy satchel charge right in. Boom. But wait, the bunker isn't dead. A machine gun instantly opens fire from a second aperture that was cut into the exact same position. And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying reality of Korebayoshi's design. This horrifically ingenious setup meant Gray had to cross all the way back through that live minefield, grab another charge, and hit that second opening just to destroy one single bunker.
Now, throughout this whole agonizing process, he is under what his Medal of Honor citation explicitly calls blanketing fire. I mean, machine gun bursts are literally tearing up the dirt all around his feet. Grenade barrages are just raining down on him. At one point, a Japanese grenade explodes so incredibly close to him that the concussive blast literally blows the helmet right off his head. Can you imagine? And yet, completely unarmed, he just keeps moving forward.
12 lets. Let that number really sink in for a second. He didn't cross that active minefield once, or even twice. He walked back and forth through a live minefield, completely unarmed, under relentless heavy machine gun and grenade fire 12 separate times just to fetch more explosives. It is a level of agonizing, repetitive courage that is honestly almost impossible to wrap your head around. Let's look at the immense tactical impact of this crazy one-man operation. By carefully tracing his exact same footsteps through the dirt on all 12 of those trips, Gray achieved 3 massive results. First, 6 heavily fortified emplacements were totally destroyed. Second, over 25 Japanese troops were neutralized. But perhaps the absolute most crucial takeaway? He completely disarmed the minefield. By methodically clearing that lane on foot, he single-handedly broke the stalemate. He created a perfectly safe path for his entire platoon to advance without triggering a single mine. Section 18. The Legacy of Ross Gray, a Fatal Sacrifice.
Against all odds, Gray achieved a miraculous victory that day. He survived the truly impossible. But war is fiercely, brutally unforgiving. The man his platoon affectionately called the Deacon would never actually make it back home to Marvel Valley, Alabama. Just 6 days after this astonishing solo assault, on February 27th, Sergeant Ross F. Gray was fatally wounded by an incoming enemy artillery shell. He was only 24 years old. He died long before the agonizing month-long battle for Iwo Jima finally wrapped up and way before his division could finally leave that island. And tragically, his mother, who was just heartbroken, passed away not long after learning the news.
The nation, however, made absolutely sure his sacrifice would never be forgotten. Gray was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, which made him the only recipient ever from Bibb County, Alabama. But you know, his legacy actually expanded way beyond his home state. In 1970, the U.S. Navy commissioned the USS Gray, a Knox-class frigate named completely in his honor, and its motto, Seek, Engage, Destroy. I mean, what a perfectly fitting tribute to the former carpenter who systematically dismantled an unbreakable fortress.
Which brings us to our final slide, and a provocative question I really want to leave you with today. What does one man's ultimate sacrifice actually mean inside the massive grinding machinery of the Pacific War? Think about it. Iwo Jima was largely defined by vast naval fleets, massive aerial bombardments, and thousands upon thousands of troops. Yet when the entire advance was stopped completely cold by the deadliest defenses in Marine Corps history, it wasn't a tank or a giant battleship that finally broke the line. No, it was just one man, armed with explosives, his faith, and his specialized training, walking completely unarmed into the fire. I want you to think about the staggering level of individual bravery required to personally change the course of a battle like that. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.